learning. Have you heard of cooperative learning? Yes? Okay, I see some hands. Have you used ideas from cooperative learning in your classroom? I see some hands. Okay, good. Was it helpful? Did it help your class? They can be very helpful. And can you raise your hands again so that if the rest of you don't believe me, at the end of today, you can talk with some of these teachers who have used it and who found that it was helpful in getting students to talk and to participate and to really be much more communicative. Okay, cooperative learning comes from a lot of ideas and theories by an educator whose last name is Kagan. So these are often called Kagan's cooperative structures and cooperative learning ideas. And we're going to spend a few minutes talking about these so you're familiar with them. There is a lot of literature written about these. We don't have time for all that today. But we're just going to give a quick little summary of some of these ideas. Okay. So, cooperative learning and Kagan structures are built on 4 principles. You can see them here. Positive interdependence, we'll talk about this. Individual accountability, we'll talk about this. Equal participation, and simultaneous interaction. An easy way to remember these is PIES. P-I-E-S. Okay. Positive interdependence. Means that in the group, every member of that group has to play his or her role in order for that group to succeed. Do you sometimes have groups where you do a group work activity but let's take your group for an example. Let's say your group is not very successful. Maybe 3 of you do all the work all the time, and some of you don't do any of the work. Do you have situations like that in your class? Yes. Yeah? You put the students in groups, and some of the students do all the work, and some of the students just don't do anything.
Yes.
That's not very successful. So these activities for cooperative structures are set up so that all of the students have a responsibility to do the work, to make the group successful. Now, how do you do that? Let's say, for example, we'll look at this group here. You'll be my example group. Maybe I know my students, I know who they are, and maybe I know that you really don't like to talk. And so maybe if I put you in a group, you're going to be silent. You're not going to say anything. Well, maybe what I can do is I can assign you a role. And I can say, you are going to be the secretary of the group. You are going to take notes. You're going to have a group discussion, and I know you don't say much, but I need you to participate somehow. So you're going to be the secretary and take notes in the group. Maybe I know that you really like to talk, and you talk a lot, and that's good, but sometimes we have to balance the group a little bit, and so I say, okay, you know what? You can be the timekeeper. You can pay attention to time. So that gives the other students a bit more chance to speak and to say something. And maybe I have another student who I know talks a lot too. And I can say, okay, I would like you to be kind of the, what would we call it? The mediator. We're going to have a discussion, pros and cons. And sometimes these discussions can get a little tense in our class. So if we have a mediator there to kind of make sure that everything goes smoothly, make sure that people have equal time, that can be a really effective way of assigning roles so that everyone in the group has a responsibility.
Yes.
This one is good too, number 2. Individual accountability. This is very similar to the responsibility we were talking about earlier. Each member in the group is individually accountable for a part of that group's outcome. Everybody has to do their job and play their part, or else this wouldn't be very successful. We just did something that showed an example of why this is important. When we did handout 6, and each group had a different question, and then we talked about them all together, if one of our groups didn't do it, we wouldn't have all the answers. So this is a way to make sure that each group or each person in the group is responsible for helping the whole project. Equal participation. This is very similar to the first one. We want to make sure that people are participating equally. If we're doing group work, as the teacher, we have to pay attention. Some students might need more encouragement to speak up. Some students, we might have to help them give other students a chance to speak. We can do this sometimes by having students take turns, or maybe limiting the time that each student takes, or like we talked about before, a division of labor. You're the secretary, you're the timekeeper. And this second part is interesting too. Maybe it's not just how much the students talk, but what their level of proficiency is. So if you have a group and some of the students are very advanced and some of them are not, you can help some of the lower level students participate by giving them very specific tasks to do, specific jobs to do, so that these students aren't perhaps overwhelmed by the language level of the other students in the group. And this is the best part, I think. Simultaneous interaction. Do you remember when we were talking about the 3 different classes? And the first class, I was the teacher, and I stood up here and I asked you a question. And then I asked you a question. And then I asked you a question. How long are your classes? 40, 45 minutes, something like that. If I do this, question, 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 how many times does each student talk? A lot? Not a lot. Maybe just once or twice. The whole class, during that whole class time, you only say 1 or 2 things? That's not a lot of practice. But if we've got group work going on, each student is talking, they're talking the whole class. So they are talking a lot more in that class. Now, here's a question I have for you. A lot of people say, oh, but with group work, students are talking to each other. Yeah. Well, what if they make a mistake? What do you think? Can students learn from each other? Yeah, students can learn from each other. They can learn from the teacher, but they can also learn from each other. If they're learning from each other, they're able to work together, cooperative learning, to learn together. So it doesn't always have to all come from the teacher.